Good morning to all of you. Thank you for having me here. I have been given this very challenging job of presenting mind management, consciousness, all this in the first person perspective. So all of you are familiar with consciousness studies. You know very well how difficult the first person perspective is. Third person still we can manage somehow. But in doing it in first person is a real challenge. But I'll try to do my best and let's see what we get out of this. The essential thing is mind is of such nature, the human mind, it not only is responsible for your perceptions, it is also responsible for the experience of that perception. It is responsible for human experience. Please see this. Even this video camera is perceiving a lot of things, holding it in its memory. It is not experiencing the thing. But when I perceive, it's an enlivened something that I experience. What is responsible for human experience? That's the essential point. The crux of the whole matter, our study of mind management, the essentials of mind, consciousness is all this. How does the human being experience? What is at the heart of experience? If I experience in first person awareness, what is this awareness? Now, we have a whole science for this in India, a very well developed science. The yogic sciences and Vedanta, you must have heard. So these two together are almost entirely handling this issue, dealing with this issue in its essentials. So we will be drawing a little bit from there and I will put it in the language of neuroscience so that we are able to grasp it, what exactly they are trying to tell us. Awareness is at the heart of perception. Awareness is responsible for experience. We all, in an intuitive way, we know this. Even if I didn't tell it here, we all know this as a basic fact. Like for example, let's try an experiment, a simple experiment here with all of you. Just raise your hand like this, please. Yes. Now please see this. You are aware you raised your hand. Is the hand aware of you or that it was raised? No. You are aware you raised your hand. You turn your face. You are aware you turned your face. The face is not aware of you. You are aware of your body. Body is not aware of you. Isn't this true? You are aware of the thoughts going on in your mind. That's why you have memory. You can think about them later on. You have metacognition. You can think about your thinking. So, memory and metacognition, all these are sort of proofs that you are aware of your thoughts, but your thoughts are not aware of you. What does this simple statement mean? I am aware of the body, body is not aware of me. I am aware of my thoughts, thoughts are not aware of me. It means I, the subject, in some way, awareness belongs to the subject, and I, the subject, I am able to perceive the body and mind objectively if I want. Does this make sense? I, the subject, am able to perceive the body as an object. I am able to perceive my thought as an object. If I try harder, I can make thought an objective process. I can perfectly perceive what is going on in my mind. If I cease to identify with what is going on in my mind, I can perceive my anger, my emotion, my thinking, everything like going on like a film in front of you. So this capacity the human mind has. It not only perceives, it perceives things as an experience, as an enlivened something. And it can make everything objective to it. This is a point which we miss in neuroscience, which we don't usually discuss about. This capacity of the human mind to objectify even the thought process. And there is a systematic way to do this. When you asked for the first person perspective, I was very happy because essentially yoga is about the first person perspective. You have to do, it's a do it yourself thing. You do it yourself. If an fMRI scan tells me that this is what is happening in your brain, that's a third person perspective. You see, your own experience of life is in the first person always. If I'm hungry, I know automatically I'm hungry. A CT scan does not actually have to tell me whether there is food in my stomach or not. You may say, oh, that is the proof of your hunger. But from my standpoint, the feel of hunger is immediate. So first person perspective is always a very valid way of understanding how things are happening. And Yoga Vedanta is giving you the first person perspective of awareness through which experience is taking place. Everything else, every other science gives you the third person perspective. Today we are trying to combine the two in neurophenomenology, as you all know, but it is essential to study the first person perspective in itself. And there are techniques to do this. This is what I will dwell upon. It all takes a different kind of approach, that is all. Because you know how yoga sees the mind. I told you the mind has this capacity to experience and make everything objective. So according to the yogic sciences, mind is nothing but thoughts floating on your consciousness, on pure consciousness. Now the thought has been given so much importance that we have no clue about this consciousness. But this very mind, the whole thing, can, in its very depths, it can lead me to that level of awareness, what we call pure consciousness. It can lead me there. If I control this surface thought world. So there is a systematic way of doing this. Essentially, yoga means, you know, the yogic equation which we always give, the very first, second sutra of Patanjali Yoga Sutras gives you this. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodh, which means stopping the waves of the mind. To what purpose? The fourth sutra gives you that. Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. So that the witnessing awareness, which is the background of your thought process, goes into its swarup, goes into its real nature, which is pure consciousness. That is the purpose of yoga. The purpose of samadhi is pure knowledge. Samadhi is not an end in itself. You are not stopping thought just like that. It has a definite purpose. It will take you to the very foundation of the thought process. And there is a way to do this. We will discuss the way. The simple, if I put this whole thing, these two sutras in an equation form, you will understand it better. You see, mind is equal to thoughts plus consciousness. Right? So consciousness should be equal to mind minus thoughts. This is the second sutra. Right? Does it make sense? Yes? So systematically, consciously, if I can remove thoughts from my mind, I must arrive at the experience of pure awareness, according to the Yoga Sutras. Now we are going to try it out, don't worry. Everything that is theory in yoga is based on practice. It's a totally practical science. That's why it's a science. And if I can remove thoughts from my mind, ideally, consciousness should remain over. Now I have to do this process itself consciously. Many times when we sit to meditate, we naturally go into a state of sleep. This way yoga cannot be done. So you require the entire vitality of your system, a totally awake mind, and then systematically, consciously you stop the thought process. It must take you somewhere, this state. Where does it take you? How does it take you? This is what we will be discussing. Please see this. If I am able to stop thought for a longer period of time, then the fourth sutra comes into operation. The witnessing awareness. Just now also you saw, you were the witness of the raising of your hand. You are the witness of the thoughts of your mind. But the tendency of the mind is to quickly identify with the thought process again and again. So it becomes very difficult to notice something called an independent awareness behind the thought process. Are you getting the point? The mind, nature is such, it will identify with the thought process. Suppose I think about you, for example. Immediately how you are, who you are, what you were 10 years back, your entire history will come into my mind, pop up in my mind. And I will identify you with very many emotions, very many ideas. I don't see you as you are. This is the nature of the mind because of its identification with the thought process. Now in yoga, fundamentally we are trying to separate thought process from the witnessing consciousness. That is why Chitta Vritti Nirodh is recommended, so that you go into the condition where you are the complete witness of the thought process. This is a huge jump in your perception of things. What happens when you make this jump? Essentially, how do they make this jump in yoga? See, this is no small matter. Yogically speaking, if you can make this separation for a period of 144 seconds, which means a little over 2 minutes, you will go into the state of samadhi. You are stopping thought in a completely conscious state of mind for a period of 144 seconds. Beyond that is samadhi. Till 144 seconds it is dhyan, meditate. That's the 7th stage of, I think you are familiar with Patanjali Yoga Sutras. The last stage is samadhi. They don't call it the last stage. That is the first stage of real awakening, real life, they will say. Because please see this, your experience of life is through your conscious mind. If you augmented that conscious experience, won't you have a better experience of life? If my experience of life is through conscious experiences, isn't it? I am conscious of things, so this enlivened experience of life. Now if I augmented that level of awareness in me, I would require fewer objects to keep me happy or engaged. By myself, I am full of awareness. This is a possibility. In fact, the very purpose of yoga is to augment this awareness, what we are calling awareness, to separate it from the thought process. Now, the yogic technique to do this...
Ma'am, I have just one question before you go into deep.
Yes.
Which I am suffering from the conflict. You were saying that I am aware of my body, but body is not aware of my mind. That was your first starting point. Look at the Ganapati. Mind is of elephant, the head is, the brain is of elephant,
yes.
Body is of human.
Yes.
Now, he is expressing like a human.
Yes.
So, if the body is not aware of the mind or brain or instrument brain, where the mind is working, how can he write so many things? I am asking this question to me. I also do not know the answer. So I am posing this question to you, that is not body aware of? Who is aware of me?
See, from the body standpoint, this is how phenomenological method means like this. From the body standpoint, it has no awareness of the thinking mind. It has memory spread all over it, but it has no awareness of awareness. But you have awareness of the body, which means awareness belongs to a subject which is apart from the body.
Agreed, that is self. But in the body of, I'm a specific case of Ganapati, where it has transplanted, which I am debating on, I do not know.
I think Ganapati will give the explanation best as to how he perceives. Because phenomenological method is like that. It is from the first person perspective. I cannot say what Ganapati experiences, isn't it?
That is, I will not say, this answer is not even universal. No, yes. It is your, okay, it is not universal. No, I don't want to go into argument on that.
Yes.
But this is a problem which is bothering me, that whether the consciousness is in the brain or in the body.
That is the essential point. You see, is it in the body, is it in the mind, is it in the brain, consciousness? The simple fact of experience says, experience is in awareness. Your body consciousness appears in awareness. Your perception of the body appears in your awareness. So the entire thing is in consciousness, not that consciousness is in it. This is the yogic perspective, what I am telling you. It is not, consciousness is not an emergent property of your brain. Because you are conscious, you are even studying the brain. Right?
Yes.
This is the standpoint of yoga and Vedanta. So consciousness, before we declare something like consciousness is primary, we must arrive at it. So I am taking you through the entire process. So that with conviction we should be able to say, because I am aware and conscious, I am able to perceive. Experience is in awareness. Body consciousness rises in awareness. Brain science rises in awareness. First I have to be aware. Consciousness comes first. So it cannot be an emergent property of my hardware. Please see this. It's a simple argument. But now I want to take you into the process of the realization of this awareness. See, analytically we can understand this somewhat. Yes, experience is in awareness. Awareness is somehow primary, and I am aware of all of this. But how do I experience this fact of pure awareness? This is everybody's question. Once they have some intellectual understanding of yoga and Vedanta, the next question that should pop up is, how do I experience the truth of this? Now, the classical method of yoga I will give you, it may appear a bit mystical, not mysterious. Mystical means what you have not tried before, no, appears mystical to you. If you try it, it will appear natural to you. What is the method which yoga gives you? Please observe this carefully. I have made a theory out of it for science institutes. The simple method which it gives you is, you must maintain attention at the heart center for a considerably long period of time. Usually, if you study how we live normally, you will see our attention is scattered on very many things. Our vital energies are focused on different levels in this very body mechanism. If the vital energy is concentrated only at the lower centers of the human personality structure, only body consciousness prevails in the mind. And our entire science and philosophy and understanding will be based on only bringing pleasure to that body. Please see this, if this is true or not. Once you commit vital energy to the heart, it's a commitment because we are doing a science. Yogically, you commit vital energy to the heart. You know, the magical effect is awareness remains continuous. Body consciousness falls. This may appear mystical, I told you, but this is the normal process of yoga. If you study, before you come to samadhi, there are yam, niyam, all these steps which take you there. You study hardcore yoga, they will tell you this basically, keep the mind in the heart. This is common to mystical traditions of both East and West. In books like Philokalia or the Way of the Pilgrim, which is quite a famous book, all of them you will find this strange recommendation of keeping mind in heart. Yes, have you read it? Huh? Any of you? This is a very interesting thing to do. How do you keep mind in heart? You focus attention at the level of the heart, where you feel your heart is located in the human body. When you are asked to meditate, you are asked to meditate somewhere here in the inner space here. Whether you think of Om or some deity or whatever you are meditating upon, whatever the object of meditation, where are you asked to meditate? In the heart. This is the usual yogic method given. Why are they asking you to do this? So that your attention is raised to this center. When it is raised to the level of anahat, the magical effect is awareness remains continuous. Thought process also becomes secondary. You have to try this out to see if this is true. It's not a matter for discussion that much, than it is a matter for trial, experimentation. So if this awareness manages to remain continuous, you understand the basic fact that consciousness is a continuum. Thought is fragmented. If I try to understand consciousness through the thought process, I will never get there. So then what will I do? I will apply a yogic technique like this in order to fixate my attention at a position where the heart and above the heart, if vital energy, which means your thought process, basically your attention is committed, you will see awareness tends to remain continuous. Thoughts move in and out of that awareness. Now awareness has become primary to your experience. Using this awareness, you can easily stop thought. What the very second sutra of Patanjali Yoga Sutra is doing, it is a matter of time before you manage to stop the thought process almost entirely for a long period of time. And then, that is why they give this equation here, yogo yogena jnatavyo yogo yogat pravartate, which means you can know yoga only through yoga. And you can proceed in yoga only through yoga, not through the thought mechanism. We are here, we are thinking, we are discussing. That's why there will be some anomalies, some level of misunderstanding. Perfection cannot come, it can only come at the yogic level. It cannot come through the medium of thought. But a general idea, a general understanding can come if we understand these basic steps. If awareness remains continuous, I have managed to objectify the thought process itself. This is the way to study the mind and manage the mind. This is how the yogi understands it. And then what happens as a result of this? When you manage to objectify the thought process, you will not identify easily with your thoughts. Right? Anger comes. I am angry. I am not the explosive anger bomb. I am angry. Anger has come and it will stay for some time. It is required to do some work and it will go. Some joy has come. It stayed for some time. It may be pleasant and it went. This will be your position. You have made everything objective to your perception. You, the witnessing consciousness, what we are calling the pramata in Sanskrit, has made the entire thought process objective. Now, there are great effects of this. First of all, objectifying the thought process, as I told you, your sense of yourself will change due to this. Which means what? The sense of my being the body. It's something you have to investigate. How conscious are we of the body most of the time? This kind of an experience, because of the drop of body consciousness, it gives you the experience, the body is mine, but I am not the body. My thoughts are mine. I am not the thought. My emotions are mine. I may get angry. I am not the anger. Just like that, I am not the body. So your perception of yourself changes. What is the result of this? When I perceive myself differently, I understand, you see, what is within this skin is my body. It is limited by the skin, but is my awareness limited by the skin? Things are outside my body, they are never outside my awareness. So my perception of you will be me in another form. That is the definition of you. Not you with your adjuncts and your epithets and how you are and what you are. You are me in another form. This immense sense of unity and inclusiveness is part and parcel of this experience. It happens suddenly and automatically by itself. There's no process to it. The process is only in the preliminaries. Till you come to the stage where you have made the entire thought process objective, where awareness has come to the forefront. So all your psychological drama is subdued. You understand you were doing the drama. You are the existential awareness which ever was, ever is, ever will be, in which thoughts move in and out. You must stop mind to experience this state. Then only mind management, consciousness studies, all this will find an opening. Yoga is required to support these sciences. If the experience is not there, we are only trying to understand consciousness from the level of mind. Is it possible? You yourself told me just now it's not possible. This is the basic fundamental mistake we are making when we try to study a phenomenon like consciousness. You are functioning through consciousness. How will you study it? It's a tautological statement to say, consciousness I am studying. What is studying what? You see, when you see a simple selfie, tell me what is happening. Let me take this example to help understand the concept. When you see your selfie and appreciate it, what is studying what? Tell me, please. The mind is studying the body. Your mind is seeing and appreciating how you look. Right? Now, who is understanding that the mind is seeing the body? Your intellect is understanding this whole process of the mind seeing the body and interpreting how you look. And the whole process is, please see this, it is happening in your awareness. Because you are aware, your intellect is functioning enough to see your mind seeing your body. Right? No, you didn't catch the point. Got it? In your awareness, you are seeing the entire process. Awareness is fundamental and primary even to mind function. If you were unaware, a selfie would mean nothing to you. So you see, to this, will a selfie of it mean anything to it?
No.
Because it is not self-aware, fundamentally. Awareness creates experience for you. Awareness is responsible for experience. Experience itself is always in first person awareness. Now you are studying the experience without any clue about this awareness. How will you justify that study? That is why yogic sciences form part of every science. Brahma Vidya, Sarva Vidya Pratishtham, Upanishads say. It is part and parcel of every science because the conscious agent is studying the science, doing the science. Who is the conscious agent? What is the conscious? What does consciousness mean? That should be fundamental, primary to our understanding of the science, to our experimentation, to everything. So this insight which yoga gives us and the process which it recommends, different people, they have different ways of attaining. In fact, every person will find his own way. One day, all of us will be yogis because we will understand. One day, sometime, some life maybe, all of us will be yogis because we will understand this is the primary knowledge to be acquired, without which every other knowledge is an interpretation of the mind. This is the very source of the mind. You see, the very perceptive process, let me give you your own knowledge in a deeper way. The very fact of perception, how much does science point out to you? It will tell you, electromagnetic radiation rejected from a particular object is entering your eye. It is colorless photonic light. It goes into your eye and inverted image on the retina, then it goes into the thalamus of your brain, which is like a filter, then it goes into the visual cortex. There, due to the electrochemical reactions there, you get the actual experience of the thing. A three-dimensional reality in real space and time you experience from colorless photonic light and electrochemical reactions in the brain. How do you experience, tell me? How is it possible? But this is how you are experiencing life. There's a huge gap there. Now, Yoga Vedanta can step in here and tell you, first thing you should know is mind is required for perception, right? I may be looking at that thing, but if my mind is elsewhere, I'm not seeing it. This happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
So mind is required for perception, first thing. You never talked of mind. Mindfulness is required for perception. Second is, the entire perception is happening in your awareness. Technically, how it is explained in Vedanta is, the mind gets modified by the vritti. Vritti is a modification of the mind, which it suffers when you actually perceive an object. See, in the brain, it has come to the level of the visual cortex and all the electrochemistry there is going on. The brain is only the hardware. It is programmed by a software which we call mind. In the mind, due to the perception of that object, a modification has occurred, what we call vritti. And that is illumined by awareness standing behind the mind. Because it illumines that awareness, illumines that vritti, you are getting knowledge of the object. That's how you are experiencing. Others, what explains experience? Tell me. And because we know experience is in the first person, awareness must be involved. So awareness and mind are primary to it, the simple act of perception, whether physical or mental. So without knowledge of this awareness, your science will not be complete. Consciousness studies has come to this, so it is trying to understand awareness in its own way, but Vedanta has a huge part to play here in the sense in telling you how to attain the state of pure awareness through the mind itself, by refining the mind, by bringing it to a standstill in a completely conscious state, systematically, and then it will resolve into its source. What are the effects of this? What will this get me, basically? First of all, I told you objectification of thought process, so ability to handle mind. What is an object you can handle? If you are the object, you can't handle it. I can handle my anger if I'm distanced from my anger. Otherwise, I can't handle it. So this is the first change it will make. Secondly, because your perception of yourself has changed, your paradigm of how society and culture should be will change. If I think I'm only the body, I will have only a material civilization. If I think I'm mind, I will have a knowledge society, an intellectual civilization. If I think I'm the self, pure consciousness, even apart from mind, I will only have a civilization of values and the highest possible intellectual achievements. It all depends on what we are identified with. How do we conceive ourselves to be? That is the crux of human development and culture. How I know myself, what the human being is essentially. What is my understanding of this? If I know everything under the sun and even above the sun, but I don't know myself, what is the point of all this science? And in my awareness only I am knowing everything else. So this is basic research, which Yoga Vedanta helps us do. See, they are not giving you conclusions. They are telling you, you do it and you will know it. So these are some of the effects. One or two more effects I would like to show you. I'll tell you. One or two more effects is today's youth force only tackling, handling problems of negativity, depression, all this. You know, I think 25 years back we did not have such a sorry state of affairs that we were suffering everything like almost an addiction. All these negativities of our mind, depression, all stress, all of this is basically because I have no knowledge of mind. My reaction is totally unreal to this world. It is either too immense or too negative or utterly uncontrolled because I have no knowledge of my mind. This separation of awareness from mind gives you the capacity to handle all these negativities in a very big way. I will show you some slides on this, based on this. And then it also gives you the ability to increase, what we call focus, creativity skills, because all these are mind functions. Now what have you done? You have enlivened the mind by the experience of pure awareness. The mind will function in a different way altogether. It will open up dimensions for you. This is a perfect possibility. The yogic mind gets this capacity to become tremendously creative. Non-stop creativity, because it has found its source. It is not trapped in thoughts of others. Thoughts are of others usually. Little bit of our own thinking has come from a different plane. So it gives you the ability to handle all of this. There is this very beautiful incident in the life of Rabindranath Tagore. Let me just give you that incident here to help you understand how this whole thing works. See, he was very fond of nature, Rabindranath Tagore. And he would spend long time in natural surroundings. One day he was traveling on a boat on the Yamuna. This is a real incident. So he was traveling the Yamuna on a boat, single man, and the boat had a hood, as the boats there in Bengal have. And he was sitting inside that. It was dusk, it was almost twilight hour, and he entered the hood and he lit a candle and he tried to write some poetry. Because the surroundings were beautiful, but somehow that day, although he was such a great poet, poetry did not flow. So after some time he just put down his pen, and then he put out the candle light and he stepped out of that hood of that boat. As soon as he stepped out, he saw this wonderful scene of the whole place becoming flooded with moonlight. Because by that time the sun had set and the moon had come up, and the whole place, the full moon was shining. It's a magical effect for those of you who have observed it. The whole place was lit up with moonlight, and the moonlight glistening on the waters, it sent him into a very deep, ecstatic, yogic state. And poetry started flowing non-stop. He struggled for a pen, then he remembered it's in the hood. He went inside, didn't even light the candle, but scribbled and scribbled pages after pages. And then he lit the candle to see what he wrote. The candle is your mind. The moon is the sun of awareness. You have to put down the mind, step out of the hood of mind function to understand the light of awareness. And that will simply bring out all your creativity. Every potential will simply bloom out if this is achieved, if the state of yoga is achieved. But you have to put out the candlelight and come out. This is the state of yoga. Don't try to accommodate consciousness within the paradigm of thinking, thought. It stays outside thought. The nature of self, pure consciousness, what we call the Atman, is this. You can use thought as a means to go towards that. As I told you, there are analytical tools to go towards that state, and you can use thought to come out of that state and do useful things in this world, but thought will not take you there and keep you there, basically. So the essential point is augmenting awareness through a process of whatever you call it, yogic, Vedantic, or stopping thought, whatever you call it, mind in the heart, but through a process, being able to achieve a state like this which will objectify the thought process. I think this is at the heart of mind management. You asked me to give the first person perspective. I think I have managed to give you the first person perspective from this standpoint. Let me just show you a few slides on this before I conclude my talk, and we'll take up question answers. Just start the PPT. See, this is the correspondence theory, the very first thing which I would like to show you, how exactly yoga is achieved through the yogic process.
Just 1 second.
You have to point to the same number.
Yes, please see this. I told you it is committing vital energy and your attention, which means basically your attention at the level of the heart, which will give rise to the higher awareness, the continuity of awareness. Now, please observe this, what is written here. Each level of vital energy yields a different level of awareness. The first 3 levels, as you can see in the picture there, the first 3 levels yield only body consciousness, and hence happiness at these levels is only sensual joy. The 4th level relieves one of body consciousness, and hence happiness here has to do with intellectual joy and the joy of higher awareness. So also the higher the level, the subtler, happier and purer the dimension of your experience. Whichever model we use, for every tier of higher awareness, there is a corresponding level of happiness. As we move upward, we realize we are moving inward. Every tier yields a fixed level of fulfillment. Any activity on the tier will yield the same level of fulfillment. So fulfillment is not activity based but awareness based. This you can understand only through yoga. It's a process for the goal we are trying to see. This is the classic yogic method, what in Raj Yoga is prescribed. Now, what does high self-awareness do for you, do to the human mind? You see, your decision-making quality, the quality of your decisions, coordination, conflict management, all of this, the probability of success will be so high. This has been scientifically proved. We have substantial scientific evidence, medical evidence that a high awareness mind, a mind where awareness has been cultured, will help you make better 68% increase, you see. So 73% in coordination, conflict management 65%. So high self-awareness teams are successful teams. So a certain hold over ourselves by culturing, enhancing awareness is required for us to handle mind and all of its faculties, all of its abilities, capacities. Then how mindfulness helps you solve negativities. See, it serves as an on-the-spot intervention, mindfulness. A challenging work situation, if there is an unconscious response, threat activation, negative emotions will reign. If there is a conscious response, immediately you will see you are aware of the situation and you are mindful, so you will do only what is required. It's a simple response, not reaction. If you are mindful of the situation, you are conscious of it. So on-the-spot mindfulness are techniques to step down threat response and prevent escalation and gather present moment facts rather than react and create a mess of the situation. It will result in increased focus and clarity, so decreased threat activation and decreased negative emotions, and the outcome will be improved performance in negotiations and decreased counterproductive workplace behaviors. Practically, this is how it is useful to you. So the actual art of mind management and whatever we are studying is essentially about creating the right sanskars, not juggling with our thought process alone. Agar sanskar ho, all of us understand this, naturally the yogic tendency will be there, the tendency to turn the mind inward, tendency to handle the thought process properly. So how to create sanskars should be at the heart of the educational process. not how to simply put in information. Whether it remains there or not, whether it is used properly or not, is not to do much with information. Google is there to give us all information at any given point of time. But how do I handle that information? What do I make out of it? That will entirely depend on my sanskars. So all of brain science, neuroscience, neurophenomenology, whatever we are discussing, essentially it is about creating yogic neural pathways, understanding this from within and creating the sanskars required. You see, this is what is called self-directed neuroplasticity according to yoga. You know neuroplasticity very well, so I don't have to go into it. Ability of brain to change its structure through what? Neuroplasticity can be done through your mind alone. When you think something intensely, it etches on your brain. Sanskar ke liye there is a neurophysiological correlate called an engram. You are engramming your brain, changing your brain through your thoughts. That's the bottom line of this whole thing. You know, that you can change your very brain through your thoughts. Not to speak of body, not to speak of the outside world. So ability to handle the mind mechanism is fundamental. For that, at the centerpiece should be art of creating sanskars so that you pattern your circuits positively, so that you delink your negative pathways in the brain and you can reinforce positive pathways and have a wonderful, productive, useful experience of life rather than being just carried away by negativity and all sorts of issues which are self-created. Most of administration is involved in this. Please see, at all levels, solving self-created problems. So we will stop this kind of activity and go to the source of things, if we can essentially come to this. So with this, let me stop my presentation because I want questions based on this. If this has made any sense to all of you, ask questions.